Hey guys, Chris here. I have this idea and I've been thinking about it for a while. Thought it was a much better idea until I decided to start doing it. So a little bit worried how this is going to turn out. I've never seen anybody make one of these before like this. Live edge end grain butcher block out of walnut slab. We'll see.
Of course it's on the bottom, but I think these two are the ones that might work.
Walnut slabs are not the easiest thing to get to Alaska, so I shipped up about 30 of them to do some reselling and some projects of my own, and there was only a couple slabs out of the 30 that would work for a project like this. This one is pretty bad on the top with the checking. It's got two really big knots there, so that one pretty much is not usable for this. The problem with this is it does have a couple of knots in it, but it has a pith, the center, the heart of the tree. This is the pith, so you can see here. So that is the heart, the center of the tree. The whole center of this is going to have to be cut. There is some checking here. The grain on this, the marbling, just has a ton of character, and I really feel like getting this to book match. This, on top of this, book matched. I hope I'm not opening up a big can of worms here by doing this. See how it goes. At this point, I'm just getting enough of this bark off to make sure that there isn't any dirt going through my planer. These slabs were just small enough to fit through the P25 Laguna planer. Took some rough measurements to see where I'm going to end up. Deciding where to cut these nice slabs in half is, well, it's a little nerve-wracking. Alright, so we got these all planed down. Now here's the question on how much of this kind of rustic live edge do I leave? Do I leave the wormholes with the, the sawdust that they leave behind? Fill it in with some CA glue to try to get it to stick. The problem with this one, it's going to be a compromise between keeping the live edge and fixing these cracks in the checking here. The problem is that this portion right here, even though it's sapwood, this is a little bit on the punky side. It's a little bit rotted out, so I might have to get rid of some of that. I'd like to keep some of the wormholes on the outside. That would look pretty sweet. This one I'm not going to have to cut to take out the pith or the cracks. This one I am. So this one is going to have some glue lines. It'll be a little bit shortened up. It's going to be hard to do. I made these little 90-degree Baltic birch fixture clamps for holding my cutting boards, and it turns out they work great for a lot of different situations. At this point, I'm not exactly sure what I'm doing with the live edge here. I have some real punky spots that I've sanded through, and I basically just want to get it clean enough to where when I cut it and book match it, I have a better idea of what I'm going to end up doing with it. At this point, I pull out the trusty Festool track saw. I found some OSB to straight line. What I needed is a reference point for these slabs. When I put them on the table saw up against the fence, I need a reference point where I can cut the whole slab through its length, flip up the pieces, and have everything be the correct dimension. Not sure about this one. So it's a little more symmetrical than I would have thought on, each one of these. We'll see. We got these pith areas. They just have a ton of character, but you don't want to get food caught in there. So I don't want to epoxy them or CA glue. I think I might end up drilling out the pith area and turning some walnut wood dowels to fit in there. So at this point, things have not gone exactly how I thought they would. I had a belt blow up on me. I had tried to clean up the edges on the edge sander, but it just made them even more symmetrical than they already were. So I decided to go ahead and just drill the pith out. This way I could see what I was doing while I had each individual piece, so that I could re-drill them to size later when I knew what size they needed to be. So at this point I just glued them together, just hoping that I was going to figure out the right thing to do with them. Last night I cut this slab. I was pretty worried once I cut into it. This is like an $800-900 slab retail.
I have these major defects that you couldn't see on the surfaces on the top and the bottom.
I cut it in half again, and luckily it wasn't here. This is just this little knot. Hopefully we can salvage this. Well, luckily that worked out. Now it is time to get rid of this pith. There's a couple of different imperfections in here, the main one being the pith. We were able to cut that out. The book match is going to look a little bit different, but okay, that worked out. Those pieces come together really nice. I'm going to run those on the joiner. These pieces, the pith is out, and the big cracks are gone. This little Laguna is a 10-inch joiner planer combo. It's been a really nice unit, but the beds are a little bit short on it. So I sold it, packaged it up on a pallet all nice, and my daughter just about took my foot off on the forklift. She loves playing with the forklift, but that was a good learning experience. I was able to sell the joiner and purchase the new joiner for about the same price. I would say I'm a little bit spoiled having a wide belt sander like this in the shop. I did pick it up really cheap, but I've also put like 200 hours worth of work into it, and I put as much cash into it as I paid for it at this point. Hopefully someday I'll have it completely finished. It needs a lot of tuning. Now this is something I've wanted to say for a couple of years now. Thank you, Patio Well, for sponsoring today's video. So let's put together these deck boxes in the shed real quick and see how they look. These deck boxes were actually really easy to put together. This worked great for the back deck, for all our barbecue storage, and for all our kids' toys. I used all treated lumber to build the deck, which took about 6 hours to do. The shed itself took about 12 hours for me to do by myself, even though I had a couple little distractions here. The instructions were actually pretty easy to follow. Between the online manual and the manual that came with the shed, I didn't have to go backwards any steps. It all went together pretty smoothly. And a huge thanks to Patio Well for sponsoring this video. I will include an exclusive link in the description below. As I'm going through this footage here, I almost didn't want to show this part to you guys. It is a little bit cringe for me to see that I removed a good chunk of the live edge there. I just was not happy with how symmetrical those had ended up on the first two. So what do you guys think? Did I make a big mistake by cutting off those live edges that I'd worked so hard to keep on there? Or did they look a little too symmetrical? Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. But look how nice this is, the natural live edge on here. Look how nicely that lines up. See how it's going from wide to narrow, and then it leaves that really uneven part to try to match. Now this is what I was going for originally in my head. The idea is, so even though this has a big angle, because the slab is relatively the same width, the book match really nice. So I'll just blend this a little bit on each end, and that'll be as live edge as that gets. So definitely a learning experience. having a lot of fun with it. A couple of things I probably should have caught beforehand. So I made this about 8 years ago. You can kind of see what I was going for there. You know, when you stagger all these pieces out and then you have to carve them to get them to smooth out. That was the kind of philosophy, the idea behind doing the live edge. Last of the glue-ups here. You would think I'd be done with this already, but one final last block I needed to rip down and take another section of a small crack out of, run it on the joiner, glue it up, and now we're on to finally sanding the blocks down, running them through the wide belt, and time to start carving them. All right, so the goal is to take some of these grinding discs, sanding discs, use these for boat building for aluminum. These are going to be a little bit tricky, but I still want to take off the minimum amount as possible, but clean it up so it's not sharp and get all these seams to match. I wanted to kind of hand carve these with the grinder and the sanding disc. I wanted to be able to get the seams to match, but then instead of using like a router and a roundover bit, I wanted to rough out all the edges with the grinder and kind of freehand it so it had that more natural kind of look. I drew out on the ends, because those were straight lined with the table saw, where I wanted to carve out with the grinder to match the ends with the sides. Well, that was fun. So in the little shop here where I keep my cutting boards and butcher blocks, whatever I have left, which isn't too often, and I get to pull out my lathe. I haven't been able to use that thing for a couple of years now, so really excited to get this in the shop finally and do a little bit of turning. Okay, now it's time to use the lathe, fill in these pith holes. This block has all the pith in it. This is one of those center ones, so this needs to be finished being removed. I've already drilled it small, but I'm going to drill it a little bit bigger. Of the same walnut, we're going to trim some little dowels, pound them in, glue them in. So these end grain plugs, matching end grain plugs focus, they worked out really good. Food grade, the pith has been removed. So this is right in the middle of the heartwood, you know, not the sap, so it's really dark. I just finished doing a countertop job. Check out these walnut countertops. We got grafting, so we have English walnut and Claro walnut, and this is where they grafted the tree. This is where the oven goes. There's going to be a sink there. There's going to be another little sink right here. They were harvested, salvaged out of an old orchard. This is just a little shout out to Tahoe Slab Furniture out of Northern California. They've been really good to work with, and I've been able to supply some of Alaska with some really unique walnut slabs and burl. The English is the fruit, and the Claro, you know, I guess has a better root structure and better growth up into here. So this is where they grafted the two trees together. Look at the way this pops with a little bit of water here. Super rich. Look at that color. Man, that's gonna look good. Whew. We have some leftovers. Same English walnut, nice and dark. This should work pretty good. People just love the juice groove. I'm not sure it's fitting for this, but we're gonna go for it. We're gonna try two. I could only sand the blocks through the wide belt sander to 80 grit because I was having an issue with the live edge burning up the graphite pad on the platen head on the wide belt sander. So I had to sand these from 60, 120, 180 grit before juice grooves. So the wife and kid came over, brought me dinner, and we talked about doing juice grooves on these, and we both came to the agreement that it's just not going to be fitting on here, so I'm not going to do juice grooves. So in one way, it's a little bit of a bummer for anybody who wanted these with a juice groove, but there's only 5 of them, and I just don't think it's very fitting, so we've got to add a juice groove duty. I did end up using some brown Starbond CA glue to fill in the last of the wormholes in the cracks. But when I put the blocks together, I made sure that these cracks were only going to end up on the outsides or the bottom of the blocks. As much as I would like to show you guys what 3 days of sanding looks like, probably wouldn't go over very well with the YouTube algorithm. So if you guys can please help me out, subscribe, like, comment, I appreciate you guys. I wouldn't be here without you. All right, so they're looking pretty good. They're sanded to 120 from 60 grit to 120 grit. The sides got hit with 120 from 36 grit from the grinder, and they're looking pretty good. So now we're gonna go 180, 220 on the faces, then we'll hit all the edges with 220 again. Okay. Last one with doing the edges on 220, then we're gonna raise the grain, then sand the whole thing again with 320. And then we get to do a mineral oil bath and see what these things actually look like. Okay, now we've sanded the whole thing up to 220 here, and we're gonna raise the grain, just a little bit of water. So what this does is it takes all the fibers and it lifts them up. And because this is vertical, this is end grain, these fibers, they don't really lift up this way, but the ones on the side, basically they peel off like that. So on the final coat between 220 and 320 on the final sand, it basically lets the fibers lift up and it shears off, you know, the little fibers that stick out, which gives it a lot smoother profile, especially because cutting boards, because you get them wet and you use them, those fibers are going to lift up. Now this is exciting. I swear opening up new crates never gets old. Probably shouldn't. So I ran into a little bit of an issue last night. I do a small simple logo in the lower left-hand corner of all my products. So some of you guys remember, years ago, I got this Glowforge and I got it used, I got it for a great deal, And you know, it's a little bit of more of a hobbyist machine. It's a great little unit, but it has a lot of limitations. So for me to fit my blocks in here, I've taken off the door. I've cut out this bottom piece right here, and I've tricked it by adding a magnet underneath here. When I take this magnet on and off, it thinks that it's opening and shutting the door. So that way I can fit a larger piece in here. This block is too big to fit in there, and it's too thick for the height of the laser. Thunder Laser was kind enough to send me this 20-watt MOPA fiber laser, and it has been amazing. So we're going to take a coin blank here and recess it into the bottom of the butcher block. This is one of those things. It's a new thing for me to recess one of my brands in here in the brass coin, and it didn't go perfect. Maybe next time I'll do a little better job, but this will pass. So I've been working with a few knife makers, Carbon Peaks, Joshet, Wilder, Alaska Knives, and Septum Knives, because I've been making my own product line of handles. So I had a bunch of English walnut offcuts that are figured, highly figured, marbleized, really the primo of these walnut slabs. And I took them and I stabilized them, and I have a couple of chef knives being made, one of them to match these blocks. And we're going to use this to engrave it. This laser engraver sure makes life easier. Nice and professional, really clean.